My boyfriend, Nate, and I had been a couple for 3 years. The first two were decent, but the final year, absolute mental torment. He began snooping through my phone, interrogating me about my whereabouts and who I was texting. He'd get unreasonably envious when male colleagues messaged me about work matters. He'd toss out snide remarks about my supposed infidelity in front of our friends. When I got upset, he'd claim I was being dramatic, insisting only the guilty act defensive. The worst part? I was completely loyal, never even came close to straying. I stayed faithful while he was projecting his own deceit onto me. It was my best friend since high school, Sarah, who first exposed him. She was like family to me. One evening, while Nate was at his job, Sarah came over after I vented about another of his baseless accusations. I showed her messages where he grilled me for being 15 minutes late from a shopping trip, implying I was sneaking around. Sarah's face turned odd and she handed me her phone. Nate's dating profile, active that very day, boasting he was single and up for a good time. Sarah admitted she'd had suspicions for weeks. A friend of hers had matched with him online, but recognized him as my boyfriend from my social media posts. Sarah had been collecting proof before breaking the news to me, wanting to be certain it wasn't a mix-up. That night we devised a strategy. Sarah would set up a fake profile to match with him and test how far he'd go. Within hours, she connected with him. He didn't even pause. Their chats were disgusting. He claimed he was unattached, badmouthed his unhinged ex me, saying he was trying to ditch me, but I wasn't getting the message. When Sarah asked why he didn't just leave, he replied, "She covers half the rent and handles all the chores. Why lose that until I find something better?" He sent her screenshots of chats with other women he was seeing, where they mocked me. He called me a repulsive monster to these women. One message read, "I nearly choke when she tries to kiss me." Some woman replied, "You're a hero for dealing with her." Another said, "I'd have bilayed long ago." Nate responded, "It's messy, but not for much longer, trust me." These were exchanges with multiple women. All this while he accused me of cheating. While I was preparing his favorite dinners, washing his clothes, and frantically trying to prove my devotion. I didn't confront him immediately. Sarah and I decided evidence wasn't enough. We needed a plan. Not to win him back, but to utterly ruin him. For the next few weeks, I played the ideal girlfriend while Sarah kept chatting with him through her fake profile. I smiled as he pecked me goodbye each morning. I kept cooking his meals and folding his laundry. I even apologized when he accused me of flirting with the delivery guy who simply dropped off our order and left. All the while I was scheming. One night Nate came home late, reeking of strange perfume. When I mentioned it casually, he exploded, saying I was paranoid and maybe needed help for my insecurities. He suggested I might be depressed, not acting like myself. I smiled, apologized, and mentally added this to the list of reasons he'd pay. I dug into our finances. We had a shared account for bills, but Nate had a personal savings account he bragged about constantly, claiming he was so responsible, saving for our future. What a lie. Bank statements revealed hefty withdrawals on nights he said he was working late, fancy dinners, hotel charges, gift shop buys. That's when I knew where to strike, his pride and his bank account. I thought of my cousin, Emma. Everyone said we looked alike, except she was the better version, as my family loved to point out. Same dark hair and eyes, but she was taller with a stunning figure, as my mom never let me forget. She'd modeled in college and still turned heads, and she owed me one after I supported her through a brutal breakup last year. I called Emma and Sarah for an urgent meeting and laid out the whole situation. Emma was livid for me. She called Nate's actions emotional abuse, not just cheating. She was spot on. Sarah shared all the evidence she'd gathered, and Emma was stunned at how someone could be so cruel while playing the victim. After 3 hours of talking, my anger had turned to cold calculation. I was ready. That night, watching Nate smirk at his phone, likely texting another woman about how awful I was while accusing me of sneaking around, I finalized my decision. I had a plan to make him regret every word he'd said about me. A plan to hit him where it hurt most. Sarah and Emma were fully on board, and together we were set to teach him an unforgettable lesson. First update, our plan felt like a movie heist, except it was my life. We decided Emma would bump into Nate at his gym. He went to a downtown fitness center every Tuesday and Thursday, supposedly for workouts. But I suspected he was scoping out women. Emma got a guest pass through a friend who was a member. We studied Nate's routine. He posted workout selfies with timestamps, so predictable, and timed her to be on the treadmill next to his favorite weight bench. On day one of Operation Ruin Nate, Emma wore leggings that even made me look twice. She texted me from the gym. He's locked on. It was almost too easy. Nate accidentally bumped into her grabbing a towel, sparking a chat about gym supplements or some nonsense. He asked for her number to share fitness advice. By that night, he was texting her. I sat with Emma on my couch, reading every message, my stomach churning. Sarah brought wine and takeout, saying we needed energy for the battle ahead. The texts were predictable. Compliments on her physique, questions about her relationship status, hints at grabbing a smoothie sometime. The kicker? Nate had no clue Emma was my cousin. We looked similar, but not obviously so unless you paid close attention. And Nate had stopped noticing me long ago. The plan was straightforward but brutal. Emma would date him, get him hooked, make him spend ridiculous amounts of money, and then we'd expose everything. Meanwhile, I'd keep up the clueless girlfriend act, secretly relishing watching him bury himself financially and emotionally. 3 days later, Emma and Nate had their first date. He told me he had a work function. I kissed him goodbye, wished him well, and drove to Sarah's place, where we followed the night through Emma's real-time texts. He took her to a lavish restaurant he'd never taken me to, despite my hints for our anniversary. Emma said he ordered the most expensive wine, bragged about his high-flying job and savings. He even mentioned he was basically single, winding down a dead-end relationship. When Emma sent a selfie from the restaurant bathroom, I nearly vomited. It was bizarre seeing my boyfriend whining and dining my cousin while I sat on my best friend's couch, munching popcorn and plotting his downfall. Sarah reminded me this just proved what a scumbag he was, and soon he'd pay, literally. Over the next few weeks, Nate became obsessed with Emma. He canceled plans with me to see her, stayed out later, and came home with a smug grin like he was hiding some grand secret. Emma relayed everything to me and Sarah. The spending started small, dinners, trinkets, concert tickets. But Emma was cunning. She'd casually mention jewelry she admired while passing a store. Next thing, Nate's dropping $500 on earrings to impress her. She'd bring up a weekend getaway she'd always dreamed of, and suddenly he's booking hotels. The best part, Emma would forget these gifts at his place, claiming she didn't want to misplace them, but really so he couldn't reclaim them later. Then she'd hand them to me. I amassed a stash of costly jewelry, designer purses, and even a watch he bought her, all with money he said was for our future. For trips, Emma had a method. She'd get Nate to book everything on his credit card. She'd make excuses about needing cash for her share, which he'd brush off to look generous. After the trip, she'd send me the cash he gave her. Sometimes I spent it on myself, but mostly we split it between me, Sarah, and Emma for our retribution fund. It was growing nicely. One weekend, Nate said he had a work conference 2 hours away at a beach town. In reality, he was at a luxury resort with Emma. She convinced him she needed $800 for spa treatments and shopping. He handed it over without blinking. That cash. It paid for my spa day with Sarah at a local spot while he was away. We got the full treatment, massages, facials, pedicures, all on Nate's tab. We posted photos, knowing he ignored my social media. Nate's lies to me grew bolder. He claimed to work late 4 nights a week, had weekend business trips. Once, he said his mom was ill to take Emma to a vineyard resort. His mom called me that weekend to invite us for dinner. I lied, saying Nate had food poisoning. Keeping up this act was draining. I had to pretend all was fine, cooking his dinners, washing his clothes, smiling when he kissed me with lips he'd used on my cousin. Things got trickier when Nate started trash-talking his awful girlfriend, me to Emma. She recorded their talks, legal in our state with one-party consent, and sent them to me. Hearing him call me needy, pathetic, and clueless made me want to torch his world. The worst, he told Emma he couldn't wait to ditch the burden, saying he only kept me around because I split bills and did chores. He called me his maid who pays rent. When I heard that, I shattered a glass against the wall while he was out. Sarah came over to help clean it up before he returned. But despite the pain, our plan's rewards were stacking up. Emma got Nate to buy her a new iPhone, claiming hers was faulty. She gave it to me since my screen was cracked. She got designer shoes in her size, really mine. She even had him pay for a yoga retreat she never went to. I went with Sarah instead, laughing about how Nate was funding my Zen while thinking I was home scrubbing his floors. Around 2 months in, Emma launched Phase 2. She started venting about work stress, craving a real vacation. She dropped hints about dream destinations, coincidentally, places I'd wanted to visit. One night, on a date with Nate, she faked tears, saying she'd never afforded a proper getaway. Nate, playing the savior, offered to make it happen, By the night's end, he'd booked a weekend at a stunning mountain resort 3 hours away. All expenses covered. Here's where it got fun. The day before the trip, Emma called Nate sobbing. Her grandmother was hospitalized, and she couldn't possibly go. Nate was gutted, especially since the booking was non-refundable. Emma, ever thoughtful, suggested he take the trip anyway since he'd been working so hard. Nate grudgingly agreed. The moment he told me he was off for a guy's fishing trip, his cover story, I texted Emma and Sarah. The plan was rolling. Emma had slipped me the reservation details. As soon as Nate left for work, I packed, grabbed Sarah, and we drove to the resort he'd booked for Emma. We checked in using his reservation. The front desk didn't question my ID. The booking was under Nate's name but didn't list guests. We lived in luxury all weekend. Spa sessions, gourmet dinners, a guided hike, all charged to Nate's card. We even ordered room service. Meanwhile, Nate texted Emma about his disappointment, but how he was making do on his fake fishing trip. We took tons of photos, careful not to post them where Nate might see. They went into our proof vault, a folder we'd used to show him how thoroughly he'd been played. When I got home Sunday night, Nate was there, spinning tailies about the massive fish he'd caught with his buddies. I nodded, feigned interest, and savored the memory of sipping pricey champagne in a hot tub he'd paid for. This went on for another month. One of my favorite tricks was the birthday gift ploy. Emma mentioned her friend's birthday and wanting to get her something nice but being short on funds. Nate jumped in, buying a pricey designer purse Emma picked out, which she gave me for my birthday the next week. I carried it everywhere, even on dates with Nate. He once said it looked fancy. I smiled and said Sarah got it for me. Not a total lie. His savings were shrinking, and he started whining to me about unexpected work expenses, saying we might need to cut back. The nerve. Meanwhile, things with Emma were getting serious, at least in his mind. He talked about introducing her to his friends, maybe his family. Emma deftly dodged, keeping him close enough to keep spending but not so close their relationship advanced. What Nate didn't know was we were building to something huge. Emma began hinting at a dream luxury vacation, tropical resorts with overwater villas, places where rooms cost $1,000 a night. Nate took the bait, researching options, scrambling to afford it. That's when we found out he'd been siphoning money from our joint account to his private one to fund his secret life. Money meant for our bills, our future. He was stealing from me to woo my cousin. Seeing those transfers hit like a kick to the gut, but it fueled my resolve to finish this. By the end of month 3, Nate was planning this lavish trip, draining his savings for deposits and buying tacky tropical shirts. He had no clue it was all leading to our final act. We weren't ready to spring the trap yet. We had one more month to make him pay, literally. The best part? He thought I was clueless, still cooking his meals, washing his clothes, the perfect girlfriend. He believed Emma was falling for him as hard as he was for her. He thought he was in charge, but we held all the cards. Soon, he'd learn just how badly he'd been outplayed. Second update, month 4 of Operation Crush Nate's finances was when things got wild. By now, Emma had Nate so smitten he was slipping up with his lies to me. He'd work late, but forget to text he'd miss dinner. I found receipts in his pockets while doing laundry. Once he even called me Emma's name half asleep. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. Meanwhile, our retribution fund hit nearly $4,000 from the cash Emma extracted and shared with us. Sarah reaped rewards too. We'd take turns using the spa packages and dining vouchers Emma got from him. One night, Nate came home looking frazzled. He sat me down for a serious talk about money. He claimed he was having temporary cash flow problems and needed me to cover more of our shared costs. Could I pay the full rent next month instead of half? Maybe the utilities too. He swore he'd repay me once his work bonus hit. I nearly lost it. This jerk was spending thousands on my cousin while asking me to fund his life. But I stayed calm, nodded, and agreed to help. What else could his naive girlfriend do? The second he left the room, I texted Emma and Sarah. Phase escalation begins now. The next day, Emma called Nate in tears. Her car had broken down, needing $600 for repairs ASAP. Nate, despite claiming poverty to me, found the money in hours. Emma took it, thanked him, and split it with me and Sarah. We went shopping while her perfectly fine car sat in my complex's guest parking. The real jackpot was the tropical vacation. Emma had convinced Nate to book an extravagant Bora Bora resort. Nate was scrambling to pay for it, but Emma kept sending him photos of the place, gushing about how it'd be their most romantic week ever. I watched as Nate sold off assets to fund it. His prized vintage guitar collection I wasn't allowed to touch. sold online. His grandfather's heirloom watch, pawned. His crypto portfolio he bragged about, cashed out at a loss. All while telling me we had to skip luxuries like my morning latte or streaming subscriptions. One night, while Nate showered, I checked his phone and saw he'd taken a $15,000 personal loan. The insanity, going into debt for a woman he'd known for months while telling his girlfriend of 3 years to pinch pennies. Meanwhile, I was quietly planning my exit. With Sarah's help, I found a new, secure, affordable apartment. I moved my important documents and keepsakes there bit by bit. I redirected my mail to a P.O. box. I opened a new bank account at a bank Nate had no ties to. The strain of playing the devoted, clueless girlfriend while watching him tank his finances for my cousin was grueling. Some nights, I lay awake next to him, resisting the urge to scream about what a lying, disloyal creep he was. Sarah noticed I was struggling and suggested a mental health day using our fund money. We booked a day at a luxurious hot springs resort an hour from the city. The irony. It was a place Nate promised to take me for our anniversary but said we couldn't afford. That day was perfect, soaking in mineral pools, getting massages, sipping champagne at 11 a.m., all while Nate was at work, stressing over money, oblivious that he was funding my relaxation. It felt like sweet justice. That evening Nate was home early, pacing nervously. My stomach dropped. Had he caught on to our plan? But no, it was something else. He sat me down, saying he'd been reflecting on our relationship. I braced for a breakup. After months of lies and cheating, he was finally going to end it to be with Emma openly. I rehearsed my shocked expression, mentally planning to call Emma and Sarah to speed up our timeline. But that's not what happened. Instead, this delusional jerk got on one knee and pulled out a ring box. An engagement ring. He rambled about being distant due to personal struggles but realizing I was his forever. That you don't value what you have until you nearly lose it. He wanted a fresh start. I was speechless. This was his plan, proposed to me while planning a lavish trip with Emma, or was he going to dump her? Either way, it was pathetic. The ring was tiny, nothing like the grand one he'd promised me years ago. His finances were clearly a mess. I froze, weighing my options. Saying yes would give me more time to maximize revenge. Saying no would end the game too soon. I did what any woman in my shoes would. I burst into tears, partly rage-fueled, and said I needed time to think. His distance had hurt me deeply, and I wasn't sure we could fix it. I said I loved him, a lie, but needed space to consider his proposal. Nate looked crushed but hid it. He said he understood, offering me all the time I needed. He even suggested I stay with my parents for a few days to clear my head. I nearly laughed. He wanted me out so he could bring Emma over. I played along, packed a bag, and went to Sarah's. The moment I arrived, I called Emma to update her on this wild twist. She was floored. What kind of lunatic proposes to one woman while planning a costly getaway with another? We decided to exploit this. Emma would get extra needy, pushing Nate's finances to the brink. I'd string him along about the proposal, buying time to finalize my escape. For the next week, I stayed at Sarah's but kept in touch with Nate. I'd text, still thinking, or need more time, while he sent desperate messages about loving me and doing anything to save us. 10 days post-proposal, Nate called, stressed, needing to meet in person about something urgent. My heart raced. Had he figured us out? I agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day, then called Emma and Sarah for an emergency meeting. We decided I'd wear a small microphone Sarah had from her journalism days so they could listen from her car nearby. If things went wrong, they'd step in. We also prepped a cover story in case Nate had uncovered our plan. It wasn't about our scheme. It was money. Nate confessed he'd made terrible financial choices and was in deep trouble. He'd maxed out his cards, taken loans, and borrowed from friends. He needed my help to recover, specifically, for me to take out a loan to consolidate his debts. He swore he'd repay it, calling it temporary and a step toward our shared future, proving we were a team. I was stunned by his gall. He'd spent thousands on another woman, lied for months, and now wanted me to go into debt to fix his mess. A mess he made chasing my cousin. I barely resisted tossing my coffee in his face. Instead, I said I'd think about it, that it was a big decision, and I was still processing his proposal. His desperation was clear as I left, promising to let him know soon. Back in Sarah's car, we all cracked up. His nerve was almost admirable. Emma planned the next step. She'd tell Nate she got a work bonus and could cover much of their vacation. He just needed to finalize the bookings, and she'd reimburse him. That reimbursement would never happen, but Nate didn't know. Over the next few days, Nate locked in the Bora Bora bookings, borrowing thousands from his brother to cover the final costs. It was all set, non-refundable, booked under both their names. The trip was 2 weeks away, starting Friday morning, giving us 12 days to pull off our final act. Nate had no clue what was coming. None. Last update, those final 12 days before Nate's romantic Bora Bora trip were the most intense and thrilling of my life. Every detail was planned, but there was always the risk he'd catch on or Emma would slip. Nate was growing frantic about money, texting me about the loan, saying things like, "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical, and this is for our future." The audacity, expecting me to go into debt while he planned a luxury getaway with another woman. Well, technically my cousin, but still. I agreed to meet him for dinner to discuss our relationship and the loan. I picked a mid-tier restaurant, our first date spot, for symbolism, and because I knew he couldn't afford fancier. I dressed to kill, perfect hair, flawless makeup, the red dress he loved. When I arrived, Nate's face lit up with hope. He feared I'd end things, but my look suggested otherwise. We ordered, made stilted small talk, and he kept eyeing my bare left hand, noting the absent engagement ring. I got to the point. I said I'd been reflecting on our future, what I truly wanted. His face grew serious, expectant. Then I dropped a bombshell. I told him I'd researched the loan and could likely get $25,000 approved. His relief was instant, like a drowning man seeing a lifeboat. He grabbed my hand, gushing about how much this meant, promising to repay me, saying it proved we were meant to be. I smiled and said there was one condition. I needed full access to his financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, everything, to know what I was signing up for. His face froze. I kept my expression innocent, like it was a reasonable ask for someone taking on his debt. He mumbled that it wasn't necessary, that he'd handle repayments, that I shouldn't stress over details. I insisted, saying transparency was non-negotiable for our future. Nate looked ill. He excused himself to the bathroom, phone in hand. When he returned, he'd pulled himself together. He agreed to share his records soon, but stressed the loan application was urgent due to deadlines. I nodded, hiding my disgust, and said I'd visit the bank Monday. This was Friday. His relief was obvious. He didn't know I had no intention of getting him a cent. Over the weekend, Nate was extra sweet, bringing me coffee in bed, suggesting my favorite movies, even cleaning the apartment. All while texting Emma about their trip, now 9 days away. Monday, I told Nate I had a bank appointment. I dressed professionally and left while he wished me luck. I actually met Emma and Sarah at our favorite coffee shop to finalize our plan. That evening, I told Nate the bank needed more time to review my application, but it looked good. His hands shook slightly as he hugged me, trying to hide his stress. 4 days before the trip, Emma played her ace. She called Nate crying, saying her grandmother was hospitalized and she might need to visit her instead of going to Bora Bora. Nate panicked, suggesting they postpone. Impossible, it was non-refundable, or that her grandmother could wait, which shocked her. He even offered to go with her to see her grandmother. No, family only. After letting him sweat for 24 hours, Emma called back. Her grandmother was stable, no immediate concern. The trip was back on. Nate was so relieved he sent her flowers for her grandmother. They arrived at my new apartment, where Emma was staying half the time as we prepped the final phase. 2 days before the trip, Nate was a wreck. The bank hadn't approved the loan. He hid his suitcase in the closet when I was home, juggling texts with me and Emma, trying to keep both relationships afloat. It was almost pitiful. The night before the trip, I told Nate I needed to discuss something serious. He paled, likely thinking it was about the engagement or loan. Instead, I said I was staying at Sarah's for a few days to think about our future. His relief, what he didn't know was I'd moved most of my stuff to my new apartment while he was at work. All that remained was a suitcase of clothes and toiletries, packed while he showered. As I left, Nate hugged me tightly, hoping I'd have an answer about our future when he returned from his business trip, Sunday. His ability to lie so convincingly after 3 years still shocked me. When I shut the apartment door, our final countdown began. Operation Total Takedown was live. I went to Sarah's where Emma waited. We ordered pizza, popped champagne, and reviewed our plan one last time. Tomorrow, Nate would head to the airport, thinking he was off for a dream vacation with his stunning secret girlfriend. Instead, he was in for the worst day of his life. We barely slept, buzzing with anticipation. At 6 a.m., Emma texted Nate, "Morning, so pumped for today, see you at the airport." Nate replied instantly, "Packing up. Meet you at Terminal 3, 8:30. Can't believe we're doing this." At 7 a.m., we watched via the building's security app as Nate left with his suitcase, looking happier than I'd seen him in months. As soon as his car drove off, Sarah, Emma, and I piled into Sarah's car and headed to the airport, not to travel but to witness the chaos. We got to Terminal 3 at 8:15, staking out a cafe with a clear view of the check-in counters. Nate arrived at 8:25, scanning for Emma. He checked his phone, texted her, then joined the check-in line. At 8:45, as he neared the counter, Emma sent our crafted message. A selfie of me, Emma, and Sarah grinning with middle fingers raised. Below, Emma wrote, "Surprise, jerk. Enjoy your $17,000 solo vacation. Your girlfriend knows it all." From our spot, we saw Nate get the message. He froze in line, staring at his phone. His face shifted from confusion to shock to dread in seconds. He looked around, expecting to see us. He called Emma straight to voicemail, her number blocked. Tried me, same. Nate stepped out of line, staring at his phone in disbelief. He sank onto a bench, typing frantically, likely sending messages that would never reach us. We watched for 20 minutes before he shuffled to the exit, dragging his suitcase like a zombie. All day, Nate called from different numbers, leaving desperate voicemails. We ignored them, focusing on phase 2. I'd left a letter on the kitchen table detailing what we knew, with printed copies of his worst messages about me, calling me hideous, his maid who pays rent. The letter warned that any threats or harassment would result in the full evidence folder going to his parents, boss, and online. Was it overkill? Maybe. Was it immensely gratifying after months of his abuse and cheating? Definitely. That evening, Nate returned to the apartment and found he couldn't enter. Security footage caught his hallway meltdown as he realized how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. Over the next few days, Nate swung through every emotion. He sent emails pleading for forgiveness, then furious ones calling us unhinged, then pathetic ones about losing his job if he couldn't pay his debts. A week after the airport, we wrapped up our plan. Emma, Sarah, and I booked a weekend at a stunning local spa resort, paid with the last of our fund money. While lounging in hot tubs and getting massages, we each posted one photo to social media. As expected, it triggered more desperate messages from Nate, now using his brother's phone since we'd blocked his. He couldn't fathom how we could be so heartless. He claimed his actions weren't that bad compared to how we'd ruined his life. His lack of self-awareness was staggering. In the months since, Nate has tried every trick to reach me. He even sent a letter to my parents' house. They forwarded it unopened. He hasn't repaid the money he took from our joint account or explained to his family and friends why he's back living with his parents at 30. Financially, Nate's a mess, working 2 jobs to cover debts from loans, cards, and non-refunded vacation bookings. His credit is shot. His savings are gone. Meanwhile, I'm flourishing in my new apartment. I got a promotion at work. I'm rocking designer clothes and jewelry Nate technically bought. I'm planning a legit vacation with Sarah and Emma next summer. One we'll pay for ourselves, because we're not low-life cheaters who manipulate others for gain. Last week, Nate showed up at my building at 3 a.m., drunk, sobbing into my doorbell camera about making the biggest mistake of his life and begging for another chance. I watched from my phone, cozy in bed, and did the only sensible thing, sent the video to Emma.